Scientists working at the Mount Vernon estate unearthed 2 intact bottles of cherries in the basement of the former president's mansion. Experts say the bottles were buried more than 250 years ago and have been preserved ever since. One of the archaeologists even said it smelled like cherry blossoms when they excavated the bottles. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for April 23rd, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. In Ukraine, soldiers ration bullets, just 10 a day as stockpiles dwindle and Russian bomb attacks don't. Pleas for help from Congress have gone unanswered. But Tuesday, the Senate moved closer to sending aid, what President Zelensky called a chance at victory. What will be gained and what's been lost? We'll ask former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. You've probably heard about the teacher shortage. We want to revisit that issue. School budgets are being worked on now, and the figures don't look good. A generation of students weakened by the pandemic will have a tougher time finding that person who cares about them, can lift them, can make a difference in their lives. We may spend 2 days on this story. From one emergency to another, what exactly is a climate emergency? President Biden is reportedly thinking about declaring one. Is this for show? Are there real policies attached? Who would be affected? When we're done, we'll have answers to these questions. And we haven't forgotten Donald Trump is on trial today, a side drama about whether the former president broke the judge's gag order, balancing the necessary rights of a defendant when it's a defendant whose words have turned civilians into targets. All that and why the UK is sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, an update on the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and we'll tell you what just sent the first messages back home after 5 months. It's not the kids at college, but our interplanetary progeny. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with day 2 of testimony from a key witness in the New York criminal trial of Donald Trump. The jury heard from David Pecker, the former longtime publisher of the National Enquirer. Prosecutors say Pecker purchased negative stories about Trump for the purpose of never publishing them, a practice known as catch and kill. But Trump's comments about other potential witnesses were the first order of business in court Tuesday. Prosecutors argued the former president has repeatedly broken a gag order which forbids him from talking about witnesses and jurors, among others, and want the judge to hold Trump in contempt for his social media posts. Trump and his legal team say he's just responding to others' attacks.
I think it's a disgrace. It's totally unconstitutional. I don't believe it's never, not to this extent, ever happened before. I'm not allowed to defend myself, and yet other people are allowed to say whatever they want about me. Very, very unfair.
CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman joins me now. Katrina, it's good to see you here instead of in Lower Manhattan. How did this discussion go about the gag order with the judge?
It did not go well for Donald Trump today. It was very contentious. It was very heated. They were trying to say that he's just responding to political attacks, and really he's just reposting what other people are putting up, and they claim that doesn't violate the gag order. And the judge asked them to show him case law, evidence that supports this. And Todd Blanche, Trump's attorney, said, I don't have any case law, it's just common sense. And then he proceeded to say that President Trump, as he calls him, is doing his best to comply with this gag order, at which point the judge just got really irate and said, Mr. Blanche, you are losing all credibility in this court. And I noticed after this, Blanche always sits in the lead attorney seat next to Trump, and he and Trump's attorney, Emile Beauvais, switch spots for the rest of the day.
You don't want to anger a judge. Now, this didn't take place in front of the jury, right?
This was not in front of the jury. This was before the jury came in.
But you still don't want to anger a judge who's going to have to rule and oversee your case.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes.
We saw there former President Trump said this is unconstitutional. Remind us where this gag order comes from and the balance here that the judge is trying to find.
Of course, the judge is trying to prevent this culture of threat and intimidation from infringing upon the fairness of this case proceeding. And this has been an issue in pretty much all of Trump's cases. During the civil fraud trial, he was putting up posts about the judge's law clerk, and she was receiving a barrage of attacks. The judges in, I think, almost all of his cases have received credible threats, and this is really to protect the witnesses, the jurors, the court staff, their families, and the integrity of the judicial process.
Speaking of witnesses, David Pecker was on for a second day. It felt like the first day, well, he wasn't there too terribly long. Tell us why he's crucial to this case and what happened today.
He played a key role in the catch and kill scheme that you were describing. And part of what he's doing, too, is bolstering Michael Cohen's testimony, who really has his own credibility issues. But today we learned what a key role Pecker really played, and also his relationship with Michael Cohen, who he apparently was showing him National Enquirer headlines and stories about Trump's political opponents, for example, such as Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. And they were putting out really smear stories when they were doing well in the polls. Right. Another thing that was noticeable is even though he's testifying against Trump, he's very warm towards him. He called him the most eligible bachelor who got all of the most beautiful women, and he knew that women were going to come forward with these stories when Trump was running for president. And he talked towards the end about this notable conversation when they were exploring the Karen McDougal story. And he said that Michael Cohen was calling him constantly during this period. He even had them switch to Signal, the encrypted app, because he felt like landlines weren't safe. And then Pecker had a conversation with Donald Trump, who asked him what Pecker thought that he should do. And Pecker said, I think that you should buy the story. She's shopping it around. You don't want it to come out. And very ironically, Trump said, oh, I don't buy stories. That always tends to come out. And it just felt really interesting to be sitting in this courtroom about Stormy Daniels and these charges and hear that line.
Right. Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now to the Middle East. The State Department on Tuesday said reports of mass graves found in Gaza are troubling. Palestinian civil defense workers say they recovered nearly 300 bodies under rubble at Nasser Medical Complex located in Khan Yunis. The Israeli military held an operation there weeks ago as it looked for hostages. The IDF calls the claims baseless. The State Department says it is inquiring on this with the government of Israel. The war in Gaza continues to cause unrest on American college campuses. These are just some of the scenes of protesting students across the country. Columbia University is trying to manage protests that have led to 100 student arrests. It was announced Tuesday that classes will be hybrid for the rest of the semester as a result. CBS News spoke with some students about the demonstrations.
They're not affiliates. They've just decided it's their mission to come here and generally harass Jewish students.
We're fighting for the lives of people. We're fighting against the complicity of our own university and the hand that this university has. And at the end of the day, we're anti-war.
On the other end of the island of Manhattan at NYU, dozens of protesters were arrested Monday night after they breached police barriers and refused to vacate an encampment. 9 demonstrators were also arrested at the University of Minnesota's Twin City campus. It comes one day after summonses were issued to 47 Yale students for on-campus protests. Funding to Israel is part of the $95 billion foreign aid package that is advancing in Congress. The Republican-controlled House approved the bill over the weekend after months of back and forth with the White House. It provides $26 billion to Israel, $60 billion for Ukraine, and $8 billion for Taiwan. In the Senate, the leaders of both parties are now encouraging their colleagues to move quickly and get the measure passed.
The time has come to finish the job, to help our friends abroad once and for all. I ask my colleagues to join together to pass the supplemental today as expeditiously as possible.
Make no mistake, delay in providing Ukraine the weapons to defend itself has strained the prospects of defeating Russian aggression. Today's action is overdue, but our work does not end here.
The bill also includes a measure that would force TikTok's Chinese-owned parent company to sell the popular app or be banned in the United States. President Biden has said he will sign it into law. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins me now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, you heard Mitch McConnell call the passage of this bill overdue. Remind us why this took so long to get to this point.
Well, trying to build consensus both in the House and the Senate. Keep in mind the Senate passed this package Several weeks ago, it was all bundled together. It was the House that broke the package apart, really, Speaker Mike Johnson, because he had to put it in these bite-sized pieces in order to get the votes necessary to pass it, given you had some members who opposed Ukraine aid, some who had concerns about Israel. And so that is why you saw the Speaker break this into 4 parts, although now coming back over to the Senate, it's going to be rebundled, including that extra provision with respect to TikTok. I did speak briefly with Senator Mitt Romney earlier today, specifically about the Ukraine portion of the package. Take a listen.
So you don't think it's too late?
No, I think it's going to be helpful resources for the people of Ukraine to continue to fight against the massive Russian aggressor. Of course, Russia is much larger, a nuclear nation, basically lied about getting the nuclear weapons that Ukraine had. Russia said they would defend Ukraine, and now they're attacking Ukraine.
So really, time is of essence here. And while, yes, it may have taken a little longer than expected on the part of the U.S. Congress, many Republicans and Democrats alike believe that, something now is better than nothing, as does the administration, which continues to say the situation in Ukraine remains dire.
Nicole, let's travel over to the House side. The Speaker, Mike Johnson, pushed this through despite some displeasure from some members of his conference. What's his stature these days? How's he navigating the aftermath of that?
Well, the Speaker is largely kind of keeping blinders on and continuing to do his job. He has made clear that he believes the motion to vacate, especially that any one member can make that motion at any given time, has harmed the conference. And so he made a decision in the process of trying to get these foreign aid bills passed not to change the rules to make it harder to remove him. He has continued to call Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene a friend, but she has yet to make clear when she may trigger that motion to vacate, or even if she will do so. So that is continuing to be a threat that lingers over the Speaker's head, even this week as Congress remains out of session. But again, the Speaker kind of trying to press forward in spite of that ongoing threat, John.
A friend who wants to bounce you out of your job. They use words different down there in Washington. Let me ask you about the TikTok ban. It wasn't always included, but it now has bipartisan support. TikTok said it would take legal action. What's all that? What would that look like?
Well, again, I think that remains to be seen, but TikTok has made clear that it does not support this legislation. We spoke to a couple of influencers who were on the Hill just today, and granted, while they weren't in the size or numbers that we saw when the House initially passed its package requiring the Chinese company ByteDance to divest its ownership stake in TikTok a couple of weeks back, many of these influencers and the company writ large continue to be concerned about this being attached to this foreign aid bill. And so in an internal memo that CBS News obtained, policy chief for the organization told staff that it is possible that the company will move to the courts once this bill is signed to mount a legal challenge. So that is something to watch for if this legislation moves forward and if President Biden does sign it into law. But they believe that this really stomps on the First Amendment rights of its more than 170 million users here in the United States.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Nicole. It's been 4 weeks since the Key Bridge collapsed in Baltimore. In that time, 3 channels in the Patapsco River have been opened to commercial vessels. A 4th channel is expected to open later this week. $9 million in state aid has been provided to prevent collapse-related layoffs, and 2,900 tons of wreckage have been removed.
This piece right here, this represents 560 tons of steel. That 560 tons is about the weight of a jumbo 747. That's what was pulled out from the water yesterday.
Authorities will soon turn their focus to lifting the portion of the bridge that is on top of the Dolly. That's the ship that plowed into the bridge. Meanwhile, the city of Baltimore is suing the Dolly's owner. The suit claims the owners were negligent in letting the ship leave the port of Baltimore without repairing known power problems. Up next, the UK plans to send asylum seekers to an entirely different country, more than 4,000 miles away. We'll look into the new policy involving Rwanda. Plus, teachers in America are in short supply, and researchers say there's declining job satisfaction among those that remain. We'll discuss what's behind the problems. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The Justice Department will pay a major settlement to the survivors of sexual abuse by former U.S. gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar. The DOJ announced Tuesday that it will pay 139 victims about $1 million each for the FBI's mishandling of the investigation. Olympic stars Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, and Aly Raisman are among those who sued the FBI for failing to respond to their complaints with urgency. The combined payouts to Nassar's victims at USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University now top $1 billion. The State Department's annual Human Rights Report dedicates more than 100 pages to the Israel-Hamas war. The report released Monday says that human rights groups have reported extensive and some unprecedented conflict-related abuses, noting alleged war crimes by Israel, Hamas, and certain Palestinian militant groups. It mentions Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, saying the group committed multiple abuses, including sexual assault, which Hamas denies. The report also discusses concerns over Palestinians being systematically tortured in Israeli prisons. Israel has previously denied allegations of war crimes and genocide in Gaza. Ahead of the report's release yesterday, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, refuted the suggestion that the U.S. has a double standard when applying the law with Israel. He said the U.S. applies the same standard to everyone, whether they're an ally or not. We've covered dozens of stories about Texas flying more than 100,000 migrants to non-border states, but one of the United States allies is taking that idea to a step further. The UK approved a law Monday that would allow the government to fly asylum seekers arriving on British shores to Rwanda. The idea first took shape in 2022. Rwanda was the only nation to accept the UK's offer of a $300 million pilot program. The law not only sends asylum seekers to a different continent than the one they sought refuge in, it also forbids most from ever applying for asylum in the UK. It's been condemned by the UN's refugee agency. An early version of the law was blocked by the European Court of Human Rights over concerns, including that Rwanda was not a safe place for migrants. The latest version of the bill offers a loophole of sorts, writing it into the bill that Rwanda is a, quote, safe country. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak calls the law a necessary deterrent that he could start implementing in 10 weeks. Hours after the bill passed, at least 5 migrants, including a child, drowned while crossing the English Channel. In the past 10 years, more than 240 migrants have either died or gone missing while trying to cross into the United Kingdom. The Federal Trade Commission has officially banned new non-compete agreements, giving workers who are considering quitting more options. When an employee within certain industries decides to leave, these agreements are designed to prevent them from going to a competitor or even starting their own business within the same space. The FTC chair, Lena Khan, says these clauses, which affect about 30 million workers, keep wages low and stifle new ideas. But not everyone agrees. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce plans to sue over the ban. Researchers at Brown University say prestige, interest, preparation, and satisfaction of America's teachers are at or near their very lowest point in over a half-century. This coincides with a teacher shortage. A team of researchers from American universities say there are at least 55,000 vacant positions nationwide. The crisis facing America's teachers has been the focus of several reports across the nation, and we asked our CBS News reporter Bo Erickson to find out where the issue stands today. Bo, welcome. It's good to see you. What parts of the country is this a big deal or most affected?
Yeah, so the term teacher exodus keeps getting thrown around, and that's just a worrying title in general. And so I knew I really wanted to look into this. And one glimmer of positive news in this segment is that maybe the sort of biblical level of teachers leaving the profession, it's not happening everywhere. Overall, it's pretty hard to figure out where exactly these vacancies are because the data is just not good. So that's why we're relying on experts and academic researchers, and I got a hold of some of them. And this is such a concern to a lot of researchers at major research facilities that they've even made a website called teachershortages.com. And when you go to that website, you see some states with the most worrying vacancies right now. These are states like Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. And then when I was reaching out to some other experts, I found this report. It's actually in the Education Evaluation and Policy Analysis publication, which is a mouthful, but it has a lot of good information. And we can dig into kind of where these vacancies occurring. And we see most vacancies in STEM positions, foreign languages, special education. And then this paper really showed a continued inequity. Schools with a higher percentage of black students had more teacher vacancies.
So that's one of the reasons behind the teacher vacancies. What are some of the other ones that are leading to this shortage?
Yeah, so I reached out to Dr. Matthew Kraft. He's from Brown University. He's actually a former public school teacher, and now he researches K-12 teaching and how it's going. And we can listen to a bit of a conversation I had with him because I was curious if the rhetoric from politicians and cultural commentators, how that is impacting these teacher staffing levels.
Okay, great.
How are those bigger conversations impacting teacher shortage levels and teachers staying in the profession or leaving?
Teaching is a political act. It's always been a dialogue in our country about what we teach and how we teach. When you simply ask teachers in large-scale surveys why they might consider leaving the profession, they are consistently pointing to new state legislation or laws that have even been put in place restricting the type of content that can be taught around race and racism and sex and sexuality, because it ultimately undercuts their job security. They are at risk of losing their jobs for doing something that might be deemed inappropriate, and it undercuts their professional autonomy.
So all of those stressors and concerns, Dr. Kraft said, are on top of the very real fear of gun violence in our schools. And he says that is making it hard to attract new teachers to the profession. And also those teachers who have been doing this a long time, there is an impact there as well. The teacher staffing shortage is increasing because the baby boomer teachers, who we all love and adore, they are retiring now.
Love and adore and are responsible for some of us, which is either a good thing or bad thing, depending on how you rate it. Bo Erickson, thank you so much for digging all day into those numbers. Thank you. Appreciate it. And Bo will have even more on this story tomorrow. We sent him digging, and he found there's not only an exodus of teachers, but massive layoffs could be coming. We'll bring you his findings on Wednesday right here on the Daily Report. The Supreme Court will hear arguments Wednesday about whether or not federal law overrides Idaho's abortion law. The law makes it a felony for physicians to perform most abortions, except when necessary to save the life of the mother. The Biden administration sued the state, saying the ban violates the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. This federal law requires Medicare participating hospitals to provide necessary stabilizing treatment to any patient with an emergency condition that threatens their life or health. Tesla experienced its first quarterly revenue decline in nearly 4 years, according to the Wall Street Journal. Company data shows January through March, revenue came in at $21.3 billion. That's 9% lower than its 2023 Q1 revenues. Tesla stock is also down more than 40% this year. The company's employees are also feeling the effects of the declines. Government filings show more than 5,000 Tesla workers will be laid off in California and Texas. The Wall Street Journal attributes Tesla's troubles to falling sales, a shift in company priorities, and a comparatively small group of options for customers. The International Energy Agency says Quarter one electric vehicle sales grew by around 25% compared to 2023. 60% of the vehicles were sold in China, where Tesla faces stiff competition from brands like BYD. NASA's Voyager 1 space probe is running functionally again after sending incoherent messages for 5 months. Voyager 1 was launched 46 years ago and has led to some of the biggest space discoveries of our lifetime. Its latest issue in delivering data was pinpointed to a corrupt memory chip. A team of scientists was able to reboot the probe system from 15 billion miles away. They shared this picture of the moment they realized their hard work had paid off. Regular data flow is expected to resume in a few weeks. The Biden administration is capitalizing on Earth Week. When we come back, we'll take a look at what the White House is proposing, from pollution to cars to water. We'll get some analysis from a professor at Columbia's Climate School. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes. Did you ever have these problems before the derailment? No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Former media executive David Pecker was back on the stand Monday in former President Trump's New York criminal trial. Pecker described the first time he used the so-called catch and kill strategy to bury a negative story about Trump. He also discussed working with former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, who is also expected to testify. Columbia University will shift to hybrid learning for the rest of the semester as pro-Palestinian protests continue on campus. Many students have set up tents on university grounds, prompting safety concerns. The decision comes less than 2 weeks before the start of final exams. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israel is intensifying strikes and ordering new evacuations in the north. The government warned civilians that the area is, quote, a dangerous combat zone. Recent efforts to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas have failed. The United States is set to deliver a $61 billion aid package to the Ukrainian military, and Russia is paying attention. Russia's defense minister said Tuesday Moscow would ramp up its own weapon production in response to what he describes as threats posed by the United States and its allies. He added, quote, "We will increase the intensity of attacks on logistics centers and storage bases for Western weapons." Meanwhile, there is no break in the fighting. Officials in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa say Russian missile strikes early Tuesday injured at least 9 people and damaged 58 apartment units. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, joins me now. Mr. Ambassador, it's good to have you back again. What does Russia's presence on the battlefield look like at this stage of the war in the context, obviously, of this long-delayed funding from the U.S. Congress?
John, it's a great question. You would think that now would have been the time for the Russians to push their advantage. I mean, this is the time. Last month and up until right now, up until the House vote and the Senate votes, the Ukrainians were very worried about whether or not they were going to have enough ammunition, and they were husbanding their ammunition. And so one would have expected the Russians to take advantage of that, but they didn't seem to be able to do that. So my sense is that they couldn't, that they didn't have the ability, that their troops were so tired, that their equipment was so beat up and taken out that they weren't able to push this aggression that they've been doing.
President Zelensky has been talking about a Russian offensive expected in the spring and summer. Does this put that in doubt, or what's your feeling about whether there is to come a Russian offensive in the near future?
John, I think it may put it in doubt. It's will the Russians know, and we don't, But they have to be worried, and sounds like your report just said that they are worried, that the Americans are finally sending a lot of equipment, a whole lot of equipment. $1 billion is probably coming right away as soon as the president signs this bill. And F-16s are coming, and the long-range fires are coming. So the Russians have to see their advantage as fleeting, as disappearing. And so I would imagine that they're reconsidering their attack, their counteroffensive that they had been planned, and that the Ukrainians expected in June.
What's your sense, Mr. Ambassador, of the relief in Ukraine now that this looks like this package is going to pass? How are they reacting?
They are ecstatic, John. They are ecstatic. They, of course, wish it had come earlier. They've paid a price for that delay in terms of soldiers dying and of territory lost. But they're very pleased that it came. They are now pumped up for this new equipment that's coming in, this new artillery rounds. It's going to allow their commanders to relax a little bit on the restraints that they had put on their use of artillery. So I would imagine we'll see a change right away. The Rada, you probably heard, the parliament broke out American flags to wave when they heard this news.
What's your sense of their capacity to handle the incoming? So sometimes what happens is you wait, you get it, and then it's kind of the amount overwhelms you. Is the Ukrainian army and government fit enough to handle this new influx and put it into good use?
They are fit enough. There's no doubt, John. They are prepared. They've been holding back because they weren't sure when this new stuff is coming. So this will get in starting in the next couple of days, we're told. So they've been ready for this. They've been eager for this. They've been hungry for this. So no, they will have no trouble putting this to good use.
And finally, you mentioned it's not just amount, but kind, which is to say, also what's coming to Ukraine are F-16 fighter jets. When are those showing up, and how might that change the state of the conflict?
So the F-16s, as you know, the pilots are being trained and the logistics are being put in place with the new kind of equipment that they need to maintain these. That's all getting into place. So I would expect the F-16s to be in the air, fighting the Russians, putting pressure on the Russian military, both on the ground and in the air, in a month or two, sometime later this spring, early summer. The other thing that's coming, though, are these long-range weapons, that allow the Ukrainians to go after, for example, the Kerch Bridge.
Ambassador William Taylor, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
The world spent more on military costs and weapons in 2023 than it has in the past 35 years. A new study found that much of that growth was driven by the war in Ukraine and the threat of an expanded Russian invasion. Global military spending topped $2.4 trillion in 2023, up nearly 7% from the year before. If that number makes your head spin, the United Nations estimates it would take only $250 billion to end world hunger. The White House is considering declaring a national climate emergency to unlock federal powers and stifle oil development. That's according to Bloomberg. Meanwhile, the administration is announcing several projects this Earth Week. The plans include solar energy conservation, clean water, green transportation, and cutting pollution. For some analysis, we want to bring on Melissa Lott. She's a professor at Columbia University's Climate School. She also hosts the Big Switch podcast, which explains how to rebuild our energy systems. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me what a climate emergency is and what that might entail.
So when we talk about the potential for the president to declare a climate emergency, what it's saying is, you know what, there's a national emergency going on, and I need extra powers to be able to respond to it to protect the U.S. This is a contentious decision. If it's made, this discussion has come up many times, but if it is made, then the president would have additional powers in the short term, almost immediately.
And what might those powers look like, and who would be the first to be nervous about new powers the president might have? In other words, I mean, would it be fossil fuel companies? How might that work out?
Yeah, so if the president does this, he would have access to a lot of different powers. I know what's being talked about is the ability to control how we're able to sell fossil fuels. Are we able to export it? Are we able to send it to different parts of the world? Now, obviously, the countries, the organizations that depend on those exports, they would be concerned about it, as would companies. But that's not all that the president can do. The president can do a lot to bolster up the manufacturing, the production of clean energy technologies. And combined with some other powers that he has, or that he could take advantage of, he could move the needle when it comes to climate change and emissions. So it's a mixed bag. I will say, when you talk to companies, uncertainty is the worst. If I can plan around it, I'm happy, even if it's maybe not the outcome I wanted. So the uncertainty of, is this going to happen, when might it happen, and how might it be implemented, is a stress point.
Let me ask you about the Climate Corps. How do you understand the Climate Corps and what it's supposed to do? It obviously had echoes of FDR. What are we getting from the Climate Corps, which the president discussed yesterday?
Yeah, so the Climate Corps is trying to address, or at least as an outsider, as a professor at a university when I'm studying it, it's trying to address a couple different things. One, we do not have the workforce that we need if we want to reduce emissions, if we want to clean up pollution. We don't have people trained in the different skill sets that we need, and we need them very quickly if we're going to respond to climate change, which is already happening and already affecting our health. So as a result of that, how do we train up those people at the same time, show folks that there are opportunities for all different skill sets, all different backgrounds to contribute positively in their communities, in their states?
Last question. We are in a presidential year. Let's amend, and I'm not going to ask you about the political thing, except this, try and do it this way. There are going to be voters who care about the climate.
Yes.
How do those voters evaluate a sitting president and what he has done and what he should have done in the context of a world in which there's a lot of partisanship and where you can't just wave a wand as a president? How should those voters think about how they're going to evaluate, if they care about climate, how they should evaluate the incumbent president?
Yeah, so when you look at the president, a president has a certain number of powers. I mean, we can go back to Schoolhouse Rock days, you know, and who's got the division of powers and where. The president has certain ones that he can implement, that he can take advantage of, soft powers and hard powers. So which ones has he done successfully? So you can look at the Inflation Reduction Act. You can look at other policies that have become law and his role there, but also in terms of executive orders, what initiative he's taken. One example of those is Justice 40. So how are we making sure benefits go to communities that have been disadvantaged and been underinvested in the past? How has the president actually addressed that? So it's a combination of things, realizing the president in this country does not have all the powers, only has some of them.
Melissa Lott from Columbia University's Climate School. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
A new version of the popular board game Settlers of Catan is bringing a 21st century twist to the table, and that's pollution. Catan New Energies is a modernized take on the classic game, releasing this summer. Like the original, players must build competing civilizations, but now they have the choice between renewable energy or fossil fuels. The latter helps players build fast. It boosts pollution, but it triggers hazards for all players. Developers say test groups often played too aggressively, pursuing rapid growth and over-polluting. But returning players collaborated and chose a different approach. Here's hoping someone brings this to the next world leader game night. Still to come, CBS News is investigating a growing number of fraud cases known as romance scams. Our chief investigative correspondent will explain how victims can unknowingly become perpetrators in the very scams they fell prey to. Here, streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. It's the clock, it's ticking. Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
This week, CBS is bringing viewers into the quickly growing world of online romance scams. Jim Axelrod has a plot twist in the tragic case of an Illinois victim who was coerced into joining her perpetrators.
My mom was actually very specific about wanting to do online dating, and it felt safer.
Online dating felt safer.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't painful enough that Kelly Gow's mother, Laura Kowal, was scammed out of $1.5 million, then found dead in the Mississippi River. When Kelly started investigating what happened, she discovered her mom's role in something criminal.
She got so deep into this scam, and when she tried getting out of it, she became what is known in these scams as a money mule. They got her hooked into it.
Laura wasn't alone.
My name is Glenda.
It's the latest scammer tactic, now so widespread that federal agents have broadcast warnings.
Police officers told me that my love was a scam.
This feels like it moves to a whole other level of sinister.
They use victims till the end.
Retired Postal Inspector Natalie Rita investigated cases where victims fell so hard for their scammers, they'd do anything they were told, like depositing other victims' money in their accounts to launder it and stay one step ahead of the authorities. At first, the victims might not have realized they were committing a crime.
They check their reasoning at the door.
Kelly says her mom opened bank accounts, created fake corporations, and even set up phony dating profiles for the scammers.
Could your mom have been compromised and actually been working for these guys?
I believe so.
At the time of her death, police said Kelly's mom, Laura, was actually under investigation for money laundering. Federal agents had traced some of the money Laura unwittingly sent to scammers to Chicago and arrested this woman, Jennifer Gosha, along with 2 Nigerian nationals for alleged involvement in romance fraud. While prosecutors say Gosha was an active participant, she has pleaded not guilty and told us she too was a money mule, duped by one of the Nigerians, and says she never made a nickel.
It wasn't like a ding, 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 something's wrong.
Gosha says she dated one of the Nigerians in real life, but he operated behind her back.
I served in the Iraqi war. I raised my children. I am not someone who decides, after all I've accomplished in my life, now I'm going to become a criminal mastermind. If I'm going to come up with the scheme, it's not going to be this dumbass scheme.
If convicted, Gosha could face up to 30 years in prison.
Do you ever think to yourself, I played a part in someone's life being ruined?
I have thought that many, many times. And I didn't play a part in it knowingly.
You're saying you're a victim of the scammers as well.
I'm absolutely a victim.
And you're a victim who may end up doing time.
And only because they feel like I should have known.
As for Kelly Gao, her thought is simple. Someone has to pay.
And I have so much anger towards them. They took everything away from her. And my family will never get that time back.
And Jim joins us now to talk more about his reporting. Jim, how do scammers rope victims into becoming these money mules?
Well, I'll tell you, John, you got to think of it in this term. This is a long con, right? They try to build this trust with these folks. And at the outset, they have it. But once the victim starts to sort of push back and say perhaps they're suspicious and don't want to be involved, then the scammers can turn menacing and threatening. In fact, Kelly believes that's what happened to her mom, that she was coerced into helping them.
And then how does law enforcement deal with this? You know, on the one hand, you get somebody who's a victim, and then on the other hand, you got somebody who's perpetrating a crime.
Yeah, we talked to several agents who explained this sort of quandary that they're in. They say, look, we try to tell them you are doing something illegal, but these folks, in many cases, I don't think it's a stretch to say they've been brainwashed, right? And so the law enforcement says, look, we give them the warning, but after a while, if they don't heed it, we have no choice but to crack down.
The thicket of emotions at the heart of these stories, Jim. It's just extraordinary. Jim Axelrod, thank you.
Thank you.
And Jim will join us again on Wednesday for the next chapter of the CBS special, Anything for Love, Inside the Romance Scam Epidemic. Tune in to the Daily Report at 6 p.m. Eastern to watch. Still to come, a new challenger pursues the ultimate checkmate. A teenage chess prodigy is taking his shot at the whole world title. He'll explain why he's rising above the competition. Here's streaming the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Todd.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
Researchers discovered relics dating back to the 1400s while exploring an ancient shipwreck off of the coast of Sweden. Scientists from 2 Swedish universities studied the wreck of the Griffin, the former flagship of Danish-Norwegian King John. A tool chest containing supplies to make ammunition was found among the wreckage, as well as some chain mail armor. The Griffin sank back in 1495 after a fire aboard the ship. New data could allow researchers to eventually rebuild the vessel. Caitlin Clark's WNBA contract may not pay her millions, but a new sneaker deal will. Clark is reportedly set to sign a shoe deal with Nike worth up to $28 million after 8 years. Clark would make around $3.5 million per year. That's 10 times the amount she would make in her 4-year WNBA contract with the Indiana Fever. The Nike deal would also include a new signature sneaker. In an interview, an 11-year-old Gukesh Domaraju once said his personal ambition was to become the youngest ever world chess champion. And at 17, the Indian chess prodigy now has an official shot at the title. The Grandmaster made history Sunday by becoming the youngest ever player to win the men's candidates tournament. The victory allows him to challenge the reigning world champion later this year. When Chess.com asked China's Ding Liren what he thinks about his upcoming opponent, he praised Gukesh's maturity at such a young age, the ability to remain calm and maintain composure in the face of difficulty has become Gukesh's greatest weapon. We'll see if he can keep his cool for one more game. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Day 2 of testimony in Donald Trump's criminal trial involves a former publisher detailing efforts to suppress harmful stories. What we're learning from David Pecker. Plus, U.S. aid for Ukraine makes its way through Congress, but the situation on the ground is growing riskier in the face of a new possible Russian offensive. And America's educators are giving school systems a failing grade and leaving the classroom behind. We look into the teachers' exodus. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death